Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Best on Wellbeing podcast. Today, we're going to look at the concept of curiosity. This whole podcast series is all about looking at different aspects of what drives human flourishing, what makes us well, what supports a certain ease and joy and peace and contentment in our day to day lives, in the reality of our day to day lives. And curiosity is an important attribute that contributes to human well being or human flourishing. And this has been very well documented in the psychological literature for the past 70 years. And that when folks demonstrate curiosity, there's often a better likelihood that they have more psychological resilience, that their social relationships are more harmonious, that they seem to do well over time in terms of navigating the challenges of life. And curiosity seems to be very important towards contributing to the good life, to human flourishing, to well-being, as what we always come back to in this podcast. And the good thing that we see in the literature in terms of curiosity is that it seems to be a trait that we're born with different degrees. So amongst us some will be more curious than others, but it is also a malleable trait. It can be nurtured, it can be cultivated. Curiosity in a person can increase over time with the right inputs. And that's what we want to review today. And then, so what is curiosity? How do we define curiosity? And so William James, the famous psychologist, defined it as the impulse towards improved cognition, which cognition is a bit of a fancy term for basically the impulse to improve our understanding of things, the impulse to have a clearer mind in how we interface with our day-to-day lives and our reality. And some ancient Greek philosophers would say it's basically the inclination towards acquiring knowledge for its own sake. And so, there's different definitions and but we all kind of know what curiosity is deep down. And that's what we're going to get into, because if you look at the literature for the last 70 years, it's been very well documented, very extensively researched, but still there's no quite super clear consensus on exactly how to purely define, or the authoritative definition of this is curiosity. So we're going to kind of come at it from a few different angles ourselves, kind of based on what psychology tells us and our own intuition tells us. So first things first, we're going to, delineate between curiosity and being nosy. Okay, so the whole saying, curiosity killed the cat. Curiosity did not kill the cat. Nosiness killed the cat. So because sometimes we use the term curiosity when we feel nosy about something in somebody else's lives. And it's very clear when we're nosy. And certainly I've been nosy, and I think everybody's been nosy at one point. But it's not really something that actually improves well-being. It's more of a pleasure that feeds our lower impulses, if you will. So when we're nosy, basically we want to know essentially how somebody else's life isn't going great, or what their drama is, or something that will, on some deeper level, make us feel superior to the other person. And we've talked about that in other podcasts about downward social comparison, which isn't really that helpful for true fundamental well-being, like a deep sense. It might give a temporary pleasure. Ooh, that person, is having a ton of trouble with their, personal life, and this is that, and that's happening. Really, what's happening and what's going on with their lives? And we're very nosy. We want to know what's going on, because ultimately their drama or their suffering or their downfall is on some degree helping us feel more elevated ourselves. So, and that's, again, it's like trying to walk well on quicksand. It's not going to work. It's not really going to feed a fundamental well-being. It's more of a pleasure, so nosiness, again, it's not to be extreme about it, a little nosiness here and there. It's not a big deal. I'm not trying to say we need to be perfect here as humans, but to have the understanding that being nosy, even though it can be pleasurable, but as we see, pleasure isn't well-being. And sometimes pleasure can cost us our well-being. So we ought to be careful about being nosy. However, curiosity, the inclination, as we said, to acquire knowledge for its own sake, to the impulse towards better cognition, as William James said it, is a entirely different energy. And curiosity typically applies to three domains: ourselves, others, and the world. And so if we apply it to ourselves, the sense of curiosity, it allows us to start to try to understand ourselves on a deeper level without judgment, more of a sense of curiosity. When we notice our dysfunctional patterns in our minds, or we notice we've perhaps engaged in dysfunctional behaviors, we can be curious about them. We can approach it with curiosity to try to understand them. And therefore, we acquire better knowledge, better cognition of ourselves. So being curious towards ourselves to understand our own patterns, rather than being judgmental, allows us to have more self-awareness and perhaps have a better understanding of the different patterns that drives us and how to correct them and steer them towards patterns that are pro-social and improve well-being. So being curious about ourselves, it can be a very good thing. Then there's curiosity about others. It's no accident that people who tend to be authentically curious have better social relationships, because when you're authentically curious about others rather than nosy, you tend to want to listen to others. You truly want to know what's going on in their lives. You're curious about others. You want them to share what's on their mind. You want to hear what they have to say. And that ultimately, we all love that. If someone is really listening to me as I share something about myself, about my life, about my children, I enjoy that feeling. I feel appreciated. I feel heard. I feel listened when I sense somebody is genuinely curious about my life. And therefore, if I reciprocate that with other people, or somebody wants to speak to me and I'm genuinely curious about what they're saying and truly listening, and we had an episode about active listening isn't just good for the person who's being listened to, but the person listening, it improves our own well-being as well. So actively being curious about others is a very good thing for social relationships. It's a win-win. It's what we call a non-zero sum. Everybody wins from somebody being genuinely curious about the other. And therefore, and the last domain, obviously, is the world. To be curious about the world, to try to acquire knowledge, to try to have better cognition about the world, to truly try to understand the world. And the good thing about the world is that it's impossible to completely understand. It is so vast, so mysterious. Even at home, like we can say, oh, the universe is vast and mysterious, and it certainly is. It certainly is. But even at home, the economy, the world's, systems, the geopolitics, the interactions of billions of people interfacing to create the civilization that we have is mind-blowing, is wonderfully complex, that none of us, not one person on this planet, understands it all, nor will one person ever understand it. But the inclination to acquire knowledge for its own sake, to remain curious about the world, to acquire new knowledge about the world, also offers us a sense of awe, the sense of, wow, like this is fascinating. This is, I want to understand this better. I'm curious about how this works. How does that work? Or even nature, art, biology. There's just so many domains. It doesn't really matter what you're interested in or what you're curious about. But remaining curious creates a certain mental flexibility that can carry on through any stage of life, including later years, where we keep a certain mental flexibility because we remain curious. And we also know in the psychological literature that eliciting regular moments of awe, being wowed, of just like fascinating, like, oh my goodness, I just can't quite grasp all that. That's fascinating. I want to know more. Being in awe supports well-being, supports human flourishing. And so curiosity did not kill the cat. Nosiness did. And if we learn to be curious about ourselves, about others, about the world, and minimize our nosiness, it can support human well-being. It can support human flourishing. And like, as we said, curiosity isn't a fixed trait. You're not born, you're born perhaps a certain, let's say, level of curiosity naturally. And kids in general are all quite curious. We're all naturally curious as children. And maybe some of us have it less than others as we grow into adults, but it can be nurtured. It can be, it can grow, and it can increase with the intention to strive for better cognition, to acquire knowledge for its own sake, that it's really just about setting the intention of trying to be curious, to practice curiosity. And again, some of the psychological literature says we can nurture the curiosity simply by setting the intention to try to be more curious. Simply as that. Just, we're going to try to be more curious in our day-to-day lives, more curious about ourselves, more curious about others, and more curious about the world, because being curious is certainly good for well-being. Thanks a lot, folks. We'll catch you next time.